came to this museum without a plan. I didn't go to study a specific culture or to learn art history properly. I just had a couple of hours before it closed, so I mostly wandered around, got a little overwhelmed, and took a lot of photos and short videos. And it ended up giving me so much inspiration for my sketchbook that I filled over a dozen pages. So in today's video, I want to show you how this unplanned museum visit gave me so much sketchbook inspiration and why you don't need a perfect concept or deep knowledge to start drawing. I knew I wanted to find inspiration, but I hadn't expected the museum to be so huge and so full of historical artifacts. So I decided to capture lots of things I liked and use them later at home to fill some sketchbook pages. And I realized that this is actually a really good way to find something to draw, especially when you don't know what to draw at all. Because honestly, not knowing what to draw is probably the biggest thing that keeps me from doing it regularly. It's rarely about time or materials. It's almost always about sitting there with a blank page and feeling a bit stuck. I'm sure a lot of you struggle with this too. For me, it's half the battle. Sometimes I open my sketchbook with the intention to paint or to draw, and then I just close it again after a few minutes because I just don't have any ideas. And I think that's really sad, because often I don't actually care that much about the concept. I just want to sketch for fun, to practice, or to get into that meditative flow that happens when you make something with your hands. So on most days, the subject doesn't really matter to me. I just want to have a regular sketchbook practice. And for me, I guess that means lowering the bar as much as possible. I don't want every page to be a finished illustration. I don't even need every page to be good. I just want to keep my hand moving and draw or paint something. So this is not a video about understanding these objects or cultures in depth. That would obviously be very worthwhile, but frankly, this museum is huge, covering so many cultures and historical periods. Learning about them would require a very different approach. I'm talking about the Art and History Museum in Brussels. Feels like it was once a prestige project with lots of funding, and this building that's basically a palace, probably also including some problematic colonial legacies. But many parts don't really seem like they were ever modernized, and now quite a lot of it feels a bit stuck in the past. There are dozens of rooms filled with glass cabinets, each one packed with objects, and there isn't so much context, explanation, or guidance through time and culture. Of course, there is some text accompanying every little object, but the broader lines are not super clear. So I think the pedagogical approach needs some updating. So anyway, I got completely overwhelmed and lost, both in the actual building and also in time and space. And at some point I realized that instead of fighting that feeling, I could just wander through the rooms and look at everything in terms of the amazing variety of human culture. On the positive side, this museum is very calm and almost empty, unlike many other museums in Brussels. And I really love that part. You can just do your own thing and don't have to navigate around crowds or feel watched. It would actually be a great place to spend a whole day sketching on the spot. And I definitely plan on going back to do just that. When I was younger, I always felt quite inadequate at museums. In historical museums, because I didn't know much about history and I found it hard to get interested. But I felt even more out of place in art museums. I didn't understand the art. I lacked the proper context or education, and most museums didn't really help explain why this stuff was interesting. It felt like you already had to be very smart to appreciate what was on display. I remember reading wall texts and feeling like everyone else understood something that I didn't. And I felt ashamed for not being that person. I'm sure there are other people out there feeling the same way. Do you recognize this feeling? Have you ever felt bad while you went to a museum? As I got older and maybe just a teeny tiny bit wiser, I became more educated. I visited more museums and I slowly started to feel more at ease. Now I really wish I could go back in time and tell my younger self that I was allowed to like or dislike exhibitions, that there is no right way to experience a museum, and that no museum should ever make you feel stupid or bad about yourself. I believe a museum should be like a good teacher, helping and encouraging you to learn by making things exciting and interesting and relevant to your own life. These days, I don't feel the need to pretend anymore. I don't force myself to be interested in everything, and I just walk past the objects or paintings that don't appeal to me. So this long story is really just a way to say that I didn't learn much about history during this particular museum visit, and I allowed myself to turn this visit into something else. I became excited about the sheer variety of how humans and animals have been represented across cultures and time. I really noticed that animals appear everywhere, in all kinds of objects, in all historical periods. And looking at these artifacts as someone who likes to paint and draw, I was especially inspired by the many different ways of depicting humans and animals alike, their faces and their bodies. So my visit turned into a kind of personal quest, not to understand everything, but to collect a wide range of things that interested me artistically, to collect all these different styles, not to reuse them later as is, but to remind myself that there are endless ways to draw a face, an animal, a body, that drawing and painting get to be expressive, that I can approach it playfully, because we all look through our own personal filters anyway. Even when we think we're just observing, our interests, our humor, our life, they all sneak into our drawings, whether we want them to or not. And that's actually the most interesting part of art to me. I want to see someone's personal vision of something, their way of looking at life. Imagine everything we would be missing out on if everyone was just trying to depict everything as accurately and realistically as possible. So at home, I looked through the videos and photos I had taken in the museum. I paused them every time I saw something I wanted to record in my sketchbook. Some of my sketches are quite accurate, trying to stay close to the original object, or at least its main characteristics, trying to stay true to what it was. Like the first page, where I sketched some objects from the Native American room. I really love how bold and colorful Native American art is. It sometimes reminds me a bit of contemporary illustration, the color blocking, the simplified shapes, the expressiveness of human and animal faces. That's what I was trying to capture. Of course, these objects are full of symbols and deeper meanings, but not knowing how to decipher all of that, I still enjoy the joy this kind of art gives me. In some other cases, I interpreted what I saw more freely, and I wasn't trying to make the pages coherent. I was just following what caught my attention next. On this page, for instance, I liked the shapes of these faces, and this comb looked like some kind of funny animal to me, with these eyes on the edges. And these patterns at the bottom reminded me of embroidery. I've been sewing and embroidering quite a bit in the past weeks, so this really sparked something for me. It made me think that I could use embroidery more freely, almost like sketching with thread, not sticking to traditional patterns or stitches, but being way more experimental, filling shapes with parallel lines, just seeing what happens. This next page is again a wild collection. These mosaic flowers at the bottom reminded me of pixel art. I mean, I guess mosaics were the original pixel art, if you think about it. And this lion is basically some version of my dog, Nala, who is named after Nala the lioness, of course. While I was in the museum, I actually turned it almost into a little bit of a game to try to find as many different versions of Nala as possible. And I kept sending my boyfriend pictures. And then I added this pattern in the middle to separate the page a bit visually. There were so many incredible patterns in the museum. I almost never use patterns in my artworks, but this visit really made me want to explore them more. And you will see there will be some more patterns in the coming pages. And then here at the top I kind of caricatured these two statues. They had such interesting faces with really big eyes and funny hair. And I just couldn't resist exaggerating that. You might have heard me say this before, but I really think statues are great for sketching practice. They're perfect for practicing three-dimensional shapes and shadows. And the fact that they're white makes it actually so much easier. Plus, they don't move, which is always a bonus. Over here I drew these two guys, and I love how the museum positioned them in a way where it seemed like they were kind of peering at each other. And as I was sketching, I thought their outfits, with this fabric draped over the shoulders, would probably be read very differently today. And basically I just thought they looked cute together. So I gave them these little knowing smiles and turned the whole scene into a little love story. So in this case, the fun wasn't about copying a style, but about adding my own twist, like those exaggerated curly beards and the story I made up for them. Alright, I will just show you the process of one more page I did, and the other pages I will just show you the results. Anyway, like I said, I didn't film most of the pages I did, and this video is probably already really long again, and maybe I'm putting way too much into one video, but it obviously all fits together with this theme. As I already mentioned earlier, I was super inspired by so many of these amazing patterns I saw. On this page, I decided to basically make a super exaggerated patterned frame, that was based on this huge mosaic from the museum. And I just used one of these brushes that you can fill with water that I filled with some ink wash. And then I used one of my Inktense pencils that matches the best in terms of color to add some more details. And I don't know if you can tell, but every now and then I dip the pencil into the water because I just love the lines that it creates and this unevenness. So I just kept working on this pattern, which took forever. But it was also one of those things that it's just really meditative. And I just wanted to embrace this for once and just really go for it and just do the full thing. And while I made it, I was already thinking about what to put inside. I definitely knew that I wanted to have this contrast of the really exaggerated, super intricate frame and then put something kind of silly and simple inside of it. And so once it was all done, I looked through my footage and I just saw this tiny little statue from somewhere. And I really loved the lines on it. And so I decided to put this in. It had this silly look on the face, which you will see at the end. And yeah, I really love this page. I think it looks so cool. And it definitely makes me want to do more pattern work in the future. I really love this idea of the huge detailed frame of some small simple sketch in the middle. I made 15 pages based on these museum clips in one day. I was so inspired, I couldn't stop. After it got dark, which is around 4 or 4:30 these days, I stopped filming, but I kept drawing. I just kept seeing more things in my videos that I wanted to capture. And that's something I don't experience very often, that feeling of wanting to keep going for hours and hours on end. I'll show you a couple more pages that I drew or painted that night. These little figures, for instance, they were so humorous and playful. Look at those two little creatures one of them is holding. This looks like a modern family with two little dogs to me. I also loved these little figurines where the animals were sort of mirrored. So I painted this one and colored it with ink. And I love this page, I think it's so much fun. In the end, this museum visit wasn't about learning history. It was about permission. Permission to look without understanding everything. Permission to copy and then slowly drift away from the source. Permission to draw something instead of nothing. And most importantly, permission to approach the museum in my own way and learn my own lessons about what was on display. And if you ever feel stuck, maybe the goal isn't to come up with better ideas, but to put yourself somewhere that gives you something to react to. A few days later, I sat down with my sketchbook on the couch, and I knew the danger was looming that I wouldn't be able to come up with any idea again. But when I looked back at these pages, I remembered that I was allowed to paint anything however I wanted. And I ended up filling these 2 pages with animals I painted from memory. I might still add some line work on top, we'll see. So the inspiration from the museum was much more than just collecting or copying other people's styles and artworks. It was about permitting myself to create anything however I want and be playful. And then just start drawing. Thank you so much for watching this video all the way to the end. Please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And leave a comment letting me know what you think, whether you feel inspired or you can relate to my experiences. I always love reading your reactions and connecting with you in this way. So I hope to see you soon again. So long and take care.